just so that we can take a 10-minute break, because we can't get online without our, we can't see, whatever you call it, stream without having this on. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Pressure's on, Jim, 10 minutes. Oh, hold on, I thought I saw it.
Flashing lights.
Yeah, going up there.
No pressure.
I'm on. Is anyone else on?
Yes.
We're on. We got green ones here.
Okay, there's no need for a 10-minute break.
There might be a need, but just wait.
No,
Are you good?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you?
I got Wi-Fi too.
Did you have red lights?
I swear I don't know what voodoo he did, but he just came, took the exact same chords and replugged them in, and it worked like magic. So.
To the City of Merritt regular meeting of council, we have a revised agenda in front of us, Tuesday, July 19th, 2022. We'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inkla, Kapmuks, and Silk people. We have one late item agenda, which is 2.1, Nicola Valley Arts Council mural approvals. I'm going to need a mover and seconder to bring this into the agenda. Luck and Christofferson. And all in favor? Councillor White? Yes. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, can we turn off your mic now? Thank you. There is no adoption of the minutes. This item has been deferred to the August 23rd meeting. We are at, I missed public input. There was no sign-in sheet. Is anyone here for public input other than the curling club? Ginny, were you going to sign up tonight? Feel free to come up. 8.3. Okay. Do we have that mic on? I don't need a bullhorn. No, but we need that mic to go into the streaming online version. We need it to be on. You're all hooked up.
Okay, 8.3 is the railway corridor, and I have a few comments to make. I see there will be a public hearing eventually, but this corridor?
No, I don't believe there will be a public hearing.
That's what it says.
Does it? Yeah, you're right. Okay, it's a zoning.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Council directs staff to schedule a public meeting. So I'll just make a few comments for now. And this railway corridor had come up before, and BC Hydro was very enthusiastic about it, and they wanted to be involved and tree the whole thing and make it a real nice walking path. And it will eventually hook up to Claybanks Trail, which is extremely popular. So I'm for a railway improvement for a walking trail and not for housing. So we'll see how that goes when it comes up again. Any questions? It was supposed to be a part of the walking trail, and BC Hydro was involved and very enthusiastic to be involved.
We still have the active transportation plan in place, and it still plans on being incorporated into this corridor.
Yeah, but there'd be housing all around it.
Yes.
Yes. That's all for now.
Thank you. I'm assuming there's no others in the audience other than the entire curling club. So we'll move right to. There is one more?
I didn't know your process, so I didn't know if I'd come up now or after about an issue on development.
Is it something attached to the agenda?
I asked to be on the agenda, but it didn't make it.
Okay. This is an issue that is not on the agenda. Can we hold this till after our meeting and we can?
Absolutely.
Thank you. 6.1 Merritt Curling Club. Well, I guess I should ask, did I miss anybody else? I've assumed everyone was from the curling club. Okay. Jerry?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, these aren't all relatives. There's a lot of curling club members and quite a few executive members here as well. So there's a PowerPoint presentation. Sorry it didn't get to you earlier. We've had some issues getting stuff prepped and some issues with software.
Well, as you can see, we haven't had any issues.
Yeah, really. So who's got the magic button?
For the mic or for the presentation?
For
You just tell us when you want to move.
Okay, all right. So just a little history. There's a couple of slides. So go to the next slide, please. So as you can see, 1906, this is a long time ago. Where they flooded the patch of ice, I think was right nearby here. The rink, in 1914, the rink was erected behind the steam laundry, which was in this vicinity. So right about here, there was a natural ice curling rink. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how old the curling rink is and how old the club is. Next page, please. So this is more recent history. In 1958, waiting for a new rink to be built, curlers were under the bleachers in the hockey rink on natural ice. So then in 1959, the two-sheet rink opened at its current location. And in 1971 and 2, the building was upgraded to a four-sheet rink. So I have some more history here. Mr. Olson's guarding this little trophy. So this trophy first was awarded in 1914. And so every year since then.
Jerry, can I have you go to the mic because it's important they hear
So
this presentation.
every year since then, there's a little plaque on there with the men's club team winners. So yeah, there's over 100 of them now, and so that is called the Strickland Cup. And the guy that won the very first year was Strickland, and he donated the cup. So that's part of the history of our club. And so every year at the closing ceremonies for the rink, the trophy is awarded to the men's club winners, and considerable celebration. Next page, please. So this page, there. Yeah, so Seniors League, pretty busy. Full league, curls Mondays and Tuesday afternoons. Actually, sometimes Tuesday mornings too, right, George? We were curling Tuesday mornings too because we had too many seniors curling. So very full league, very active. Juniors, after school on Mondays. There's a juniors program going on. Quite a few kids at that one as well. Ladies curl Wednesday nights. Last year they had 8 teams. 3 new teams last year. A couple dropped out. So you have to understand that we had to close the rink for a whole year. 2021, we had no curling. The rink was closed down for a whole year. That caused a few interruptions with people's lives and with their curling schedule. So we lost some teams last year. Tuesday evenings, we have a mixed doubles. And if any of you are curling fans, you'll have seen that at the Olympics, and it's now an Olympic sport. So pretty popular. It's full on Tuesday evenings. We may have to add another session for mixed doubles. Men's Thursday nights, 9 teams last year. I expect we'll be at least 9, hopefully more teams this year. Stick League, Friday evening, there's a proposed league. We have some advocates to put that together, so I think that'll happen this year. Last year we had 115 total members. Some members curl in more than one league, of course, so but 115 members. That's down a few from what we've had prior to COVID. Next page, please. This is a list of the executive. I can't see them really well. I'm currently vice president. Our past president, Paul Montgomery, is here. Susan Newton, our president, is ill. She thinks it might be COVID, but she's not sure, so she wasn't coming tonight. And we have, and somehow I missed one director. We actually have 13 active directors in the club, and we don't have any paid employees. We have a bar manager that works for free. And we have ice makers that work on a contract basis. Adrian and Jack Reynoldson take care of the ice for us. So, very active group. We meet monthly during the operating season, which goes from October, Thanksgiving till end of March generally. So 6 full months generally. And we get started earlier than that, getting the ice put into the building. Next page, please. So here's our predicament. The steel roof, which is now 50 years old, I guess, is screwed on directly to 2x4s that go crossways inside the building. And those sleepers are nailed right to laminated beams. So there's no other layer between the steel and the attic. Inside the building on the walls, there's 2x6 tongue and groove boards. But anyway, the roof's been leaking for a lot of years, and we have replaced the 10,000 screws more than once. It's pretty dangerous being up there doing that, and it's also really hazardous on the ice. You get little lumps and bumps on the ice, so hazard for tripping. And the longer the leaks continue into the building, the more rot we're going to see. And so we're getting really concerned about that. I didn't make a note on this page that we have had to exterminate carpenter ants twice in the last 3 years, and their moisture attracts them and wood, so that's an issue. Next page, please. Current position. So the city owns the land, curling club owns the building. The curling club shares machinery with the hockey rink, and we pay the city for brine during operating season. Yeah. No, go back previous. A couple. More. There. Yeah, so that's the story. The roof's leaking, and we've repaired it a lot of times. We've done all we can. The steel is just leaky. Next page, please. Financial statements. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but what you will see there is on a cash basis, current assets, we have about $77,000 in various accounts. We received a capital gaming grant for $120,000 this spring. We applied for it a couple of times, and we were awarded that money from the province late in the spring. So That brings our total assets to $196,000. Liabilities and equity, basically, we see 120 going in, you see 120 coming out down below for the roof project. So financially, we're in a pretty good position. We've been very diligent putting money aside every operating year for a long, long time. Next page, please. So income statement on an annual basis. This is not a really good year for us because we were shut down for floods. We were shut down for off and on for COVID. So it was not considered a good year. We netted about $5,500 net operating revenue. So we're pleased with that, the way it worked out. It was a lot of extra work for people, and yeah, we typically will operate on a better than break-even basis annually, but there's a lot of things that go into that. We do a lot of marketing. We sell advertising in the building. We sell advertising in the ice. We sell curling equipment. We sell beer once in a while. And so on an operating basis annually without COVID, we will be profitable every year. We also do quite a bit of fundraising during the year. Okay, next page, please. If anybody has questions along the way, I'll be happy to answer. So, roof repair options. So we have contracted with BC Building Sciences. Brooks Young, their senior project manager. He's a young fellow that grew up here in Merritt. So he's being very generous with his time to help us put this program together. They will be managing the construction and first they'll be managing acquiring bids and take care of design engineering. Roughly a cost to replace the standing seam steel, which is what the arena has on it now. When we started this process 3 years ago, the cost was about half of what it is today. So that amount of money is prohibitive for us. We have gone to a proposed membrane roof, as you will see at the Sandman Rink in Kamloops, or Prospera Place in Kelowna, or GM Place in Vancouver. It's a Sarnafil is the name of the product, and it goes right on top of the existing steel with a layer of insulation underneath it, and the cost we expect will be about $325,000 or $350,000. Next page, please. So, to this point, our partners, the city and the TNRD, have both committed to $40,000 towards our project in a prior year, and the curling club has committed $40,000 cash to the project as well. That gave us $120,000, which allowed us to apply for a matching grant of $120,000. We now have $240,000 available. We don't know what the bid is going to come in at. We expect, Brooks has done a fair amount of work on it already. We suspect it'll come in about $325,000. We're short about $85,000. That's the, that's the current position. So that's where we're at today, and we're asking if the city is able to help out with some funding towards that. We all, of course, understand the city has been going through a dreadful period for a couple of years. However, we have to move on. We don't want the roof to continue to leak. The building is at risk. There's moisture inside where there shouldn't be, and we're very concerned about that. So I'd be happy to answer questions.
Are there questions for Mr. Sanders?
That was a lot of information. I should have got it to you a week ago, but just didn't work out. So, think of another one.
Just to do well.
Councillor Christopherson.
Thank you. I'm sure there's nobody in here that doesn't want to see the curling club succeed. And you answered most of the question I was going to ask about grants and so on, that I presume you've turned that process almost inside out trying to find the grants. Is there any way that you can make the case that with the repairs and so on, your revenues will be going up, that you could almost go a loan idea, or is that being explored and thrown out?
Yeah, we expect net revenue to improve, but we run a pretty tight ship. Like, we really have to work at it to not lose money every year. Like, the curling club board are certainly not in favor of loans. We're all volunteers. We're all committed to keeping the club active and running, but we did a little fundraising last year. We had to, once the grant was awarded, then we had to pay our grant writer 10%. So in about 3 days, we came up with enough money to pay him. So we are capable of raising money, but conditions for the last 3 years, basically, we haven't been able to hold our annual fundraiser at the Grand Pub. That nets us $5,000 every year. We've lost all that revenue. We had no events. We had 0 bond spiels. The city was booked for one event, had to cancel because of COVID or floods. I don't know, one disaster or another. We lost all of our bond spiels that typically bring us some money. And yeah, so we're hoping to get back to a normal year, but we're not going to be able to come up with that amount, the difference that we expect to see on the tenders coming in. And we have scoured the country for grants we're pretty happy we did receive the $120,000 from Capital Gaming Grant. That's really, given us a head start. In the meantime, prices have gone up almost double since we started the process. So hope that answers your question.
I assumed that you guys had done all of your homework, and it's frustrating to see what's happening and how much work you've done, and
yeah,
there's still an incredible gap to go. I hope we can do something.
And do I understand that the curling club is willing to fundraise a small amount?
So I don't know how much we can raise this year, but presuming we don't have a COVID outbreak and presuming we don't have floods or fires that shut us down, we will have a fundraiser in the fall, and we'll try to gross 10. We'll probably end up with $5,000 out of that. That's helpful. We have been talking to some corporate sponsors about naming rights, that sort of thing. There's a lot more work to be done in that regard. So we haven't canvassed many corporate sponsors at this point. It's a possibility, might give us some cash. But yeah, we've been busy putting money aside every year in the event. Well, we had to replace our rocks, need to be repaired and upgraded and fixed once in a while too. So
the bind is, you have a fair amount of money already set aside. It would seem a pity that this building would fall apart at this point in time. And I would like to have staff bring back a report that tells us where the funding would come from. And I'm hoping, I see 2 TNRD reps in the room, and I'm hoping you're not with the curling club, that you're here as potential partners with the city and the curling club, as we did previously. And perhaps we can look at coming up with something for our council meeting in August.
I'm hoping.
How
I'm
much we
hoping
would
they are
need, where would
members.
the funding come from?
I'm hoping they are curling club members. Or planning to be.
Future members. Does anyone have anything else to add? Councillor Luck.
Mayor. Sorry, what was the shortfall? Was it 80,000?
$85,000.
85,000.
Now, until we get bids returned, we,
gonna be the challenge,
but we've
price-wise.
we had offers come in based on what we knew at the time for materials and for a proposed plan. And our BC Building Science are pretty on top of all this stuff, and they reckon 320, 325 is likely where the bids will come in. The bids haven't gone out yet. We're getting design and engineering drawings done right now.
Good.
So bids will go out in the next, certainly in the next couple of weeks. Now, there's a benefit to this membrane package that we've selected. It can be installed providing the weather is okay. We don't need to shut down the curling club. We don't need to take the roof off to put the new one on.
Right.
So that'll make our project a lot more manageable. We can carry on curling while that's happening.
So I'm looking at this, there's an $80,000 shortfall here. If the worst case scenario, or probably this is the case scenario is what we're doing moving forward here, is that if we don't repair that roof, that building will pretty be much useless next year. Is that what I'm understanding? We're pretty close to where we're at there.
We can't really tell how long before it's going to be unusable, but we're seeing infestations with carpenter ants. Well, we're seeing moisture.
That's me.
We're seeing moisture problems in the walls inside.
Yeah. Well, where am I going with that, Jerry? And that's true and everything, because Mr. Risotto's in the audience, and he could probably give us a figure roughly what it'd take to demo that building if we get to that point, right, where it has to be demoed. So I'm guessing it's going to be a lot more than $80,000. Right? So just to demo it. So I think moving forward here, we have to do something about it and get that roof fixed before we got to that point, for sure. We don't want to see that building demoed.
Right.
So and you mentioned thing that I was looking at is naming rights. You're working on that as well. I'm sure you're doing all the ads you can in the building, all the sponsorships through advertising and things like that, right? So I guess I look forward to the report coming back from staff and where we're at. See if we can find some money for this. Absolutely, for sure.
Thank you. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the answer. Yep.
Okay. I know Councillor Luck mentioned what it would cost to demo it, but I also know what it would cost for the city to put a roof on if you chose to give it back to us. And I've always said, if you ever walk away from the building, at least have the roof fixed for us. So, I agree. Staff report to look to see.
Your Worship, we're not planning on walking away.
Good. Glad to hear that.
It's 100 and however many years history, 107 years history now in the curling club. We're not going to walk away from it, but we can't afford to do it on our own. That's where we're at.
So
no other questions then? Okay. Thank you
for
very
your much. And staff will bring a report to us next month.
Next Monday?
Thank you. So the next presentation has been postponed. TNV has asked us to postpone this to August. So now we look at moving on to 8.1, Official Community Plan Bylaw 2336, third reading. And I don't see Don in the audience. Mr. MacArthur.
Online.
He's online? Oh, Mr. MacArthur, this is 8.1. We need voice. We can't hear you, Don. Thank you all for showing up. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Yeah. Oh. Dawn, before you start, I have been negligent in not introducing or welcoming Marilyn Christensen to our staff, who is our new Economic Development Manager. And welcome, Marilyn. And she hasn't even started work yet. And she's here at a council meeting.
Yes, she has.
Yay.
For the second day. I was here for the second day.
No way. I thought she was starting on Monday. I guess it would have been Monday. Yesterday. So, welcome. Thanks, Dawn. You're up again, I hope.
Okay, thanks, Your Worship. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So this report, of course, is for the Official Community Plan Bylaw 2336 and for third reading. The OCP project, of course, we began in the spring of 2020. And following 4 rounds of public engagement, staff brought the report for first reading on May 24th, at which time Council gave first reading to the proposed bylaw. And at the same meeting, Council considered the bylaw in conjunction with the city's financial plan and waste management plan. And then following first reading as well, the document was provided to the TNRD. And the TNRD board accepted the OCP's regional context statement on June 16th. We also received comments back from the Agricultural Land Commission on June 27th. And the following evening, a public hearing was held for the proposed bylaw. And then at that meeting as well, Council asked staff to bring back this report, which would incorporate proposed amendments, given the ALC comments as well as submissions that were made at that public hearing. So you'll find attached to this report a list of the amendments, and those 21 proposed amendments don't affect use or density, and therefore any public hearing wouldn't be required. But of course, that's the option of Council as well. And if there's any questions about any of those proposed amendments, please do feel free to ask. And otherwise, staff are recommending third reading.
You can ask the question now. Councillor White.
I have to ask if, has all the First Nation bands been notified of this OCP, and if so, what was the process?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wright, through your worship. So all of the bands were provided the draft bylaw back in the fall before the flood happened. And any comments received were incorporated into the drafting of the revisions to the bylaw over the winter and spring. And of course, the bylaw itself has been published on the city's website as well. And further comments were asked, and anything that was received was incorporated. We would have liked to have more input from the local First Nations, the 5 local First Nations, as well as Cooks Ferry, but we did receive some comments and incorporated those accordingly.
So you don't have comments back from all of them?
Not all of the bands provided comments back, but any comments we did receive, we incorporated.
Okay. Because I was notified today that there was 2 bands that were not notified. And so they've asked that we table this until all bands have notification.
And Councillor White, all of the bands were provided notification. If any of the members of those bands were not provided notification by their own band, that could be potential. But of course, all of those First Nations have been notified. We're provided that, and we did receive comments back from some of the bands. If other bands chose not to provide comments, that is, of course, their choice as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think having said that, this is, as Dawn said, this is our final reading on this, but it doesn't mean to say that we can't make more amendments to it. It's an ongoing living document. So if First Nations have issues that they want to talk to us about this, feel free to come in and make an appointment and we'll sit down with them and talk about it.
Yes, thank you. And that's absolutely right. This particular document in fact includes policies about continuing to dialogue with local First Nations. And for example, we wanted to have more translations throughout the document. And so that work should continue. And I would encourage city staff to do so. And if there are any policies in the document that local First Nations or any residents would like to see amendments to, that's certainly something that can occur, as you mentioned, Your Worship. Those amendments can happen. In fact, there's a report on council agenda later this evening that includes an OCP amendment.
Yeah, it's not a dead end. It has to be this way. Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Fair.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the ALC review. I'm not able to bring it up at the moment, but just in reviewing the agenda beforehand, there seem to be a lot of requests for amendments there, and I'm wondering how those are incorporated and what are the steps for that.
Do you mean the ones further on this agenda?
No, it's attached.
It's attachment F, the ALC review.
Attachment F.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fair, through your worship. So that attachment F, the document, as well as other conversations, phone conversations and the like that were had with the ALC over the past couple months, led to a lot of the amendments that are on attachment G. So if you look at the proposed amendments, you'll see a lot of those amendments are related to the comments from the ALC directly, and so staff have made those proposed amendments to address those comments from the Agricultural Land Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it just wasn't quite clear how that fit together. Thank you.
This was last. Okay. Yeah. Any other comments or questions for Mr. MacArthur? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a mover that council give third reading to the official community plan bylaw number 2336 2022 as amended. Need Luck and Fair. And any comments to the motion? Councillor Richard.
Through the public input that we had, I know we had a lot of comments, and with the further comment earlier that Councillor Fair had about the ALC, I know that some people were saying, well, why is there not more housing? But they're not recommending any changes. It's just the land that's already in there can be changed through zoning, and I think that we've looked at a lot of these options, and it's better to, you know, make a plan now and go ahead, and then we can do a zoning change. And I know it takes time, but it's very comprehensive. I think it's addresses a lot of issues, and I'm happy to see these changes. So thank you for your work, and that's all I want to say. Thanks.
for your tons and tons of work, along with, staff altogether. But there's been a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears have gone into this document, and it is a living document. It's not absolute, but it certainly gives us a guiding path for the future. Councillor Luck, you're now going to say something? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thanks, staff, for the tremendous amount of work. We know that, Don, you spent many, many late hours here working on this document, working with the interest groups. I was quite surprised to hear that about the First Nations saying they weren't consulted or anything, and I thought there's no way, what city would do anything like that without consulting? So I'm really glad to hear that they were in that, and so I hope they were all heard, and I hope that was part of the process. But you know what? I'm going to say it. This isn't a perfect document. And I think, Don, you'd be the first one to agree with that as well. But it's a 95, 98% document, that's for sure, a lot better than what was in the city before. And it certainly gives us an excellent, excellent roadmap moving forward within the city. And when I said that it's not perfect, yes, we're, I hope the process is, if we find little things that need to, nuances and that need to be changed, it'll be a fairly easy process to do that moving forward. But for the most part, it's a really good document vehicle moving forward here in our community, and sets out a really good plan, and really appreciate all the work the staff has done on it. So thanks, Don and staff, for doing that, and council as well for passing and having the courage to move forward. I remember in the early days when the council was first elected, oh, we've got an OCP, we're fine. There's no comparison as far as I'm concerned from what I see between the two and things like that. This document is far superior with taking into consideration food, diversity, the First Nations, active transport, you name it. These things were all missing out of that document that was ancient as far as I'm concerned. So we've moved a long, long way. But once again, it's not perfect, but you know what? It's a great, great start. So thank you very much for all that.
Any other comments? I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And that council adopt official community plan bylaw number 2336 2022. I need a mover. Second. Etchart White. And any comments here? Yeah, it has. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. So 8.2, Mr. MacArthur, you're still on.
Thank you, Worship. This particular report includes an OCP amendment, in fact, to the document that was just adopted. Sterling Hunt, the owners of much of the land on Acton Mountain, have approached the city to rezone part of their lands for potential development that they're working through, and as a result of that rezoning would also require corresponding OCP amendments. So the first property, and I'm not sure if you have the document up in front of you, but lots 1 and 2, or proposed lots 1 and 2, are the subject lands for the rezoning, where lot 1 is currently zoned both C1, recreational commercial, as well as a small portion of R1, single-family residential. And they're proposing to rezone that, a portion of that area known as proposed lot 1 to small parcel residential R3, which is the same zoning that the sickle cell parcel adjacent to it currently holds. And the other potential or proposed parcel is proposed lot 2 to the north or east of the current Barkman site, and it fronts Houston Street, the city's truck route. The applicant is proposing to rezone that property to light industrial M1. It currently has a C4 corridor commercial zoning. So staff feel that both of these proposed zones are appropriate given the adjacent uses and zones. It should be noted that along with that rezoning, the OCP amendments would be low to medium density residential for the a small parcel residential zoning piece there, the proposed lot 1, and industrial land use for the proposed lot 2, which would correspond, of course, to the light industrial M1 zone. They're also wanting to change the OCP land use for the parcel to the southeast, which is a very large portion of the active mountain area, and that area already has single-family residential R1 zoning, which they would like to retain. However, it has an OCP land use of future development, so they're hoping to have an OCP amendment for that proposed parcel, also to low to medium density residential to correspond with that R1 zoning. The other, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Your Worship.
no, I thought you were finished.
I was just going to say that the other parts of the subject property, so remainder parcel A, or proposed remainder parcel A, where a historic landfill is located, and remainder parcel B, where historic mine tunnels are located, do have future development OCP land use, but also do have zoning. The remainder parcel A, the landfill site, is currently zoned recreation commercial C1, and the mining, historic mining site, remainder parcel B, has single family residential R1 zone. So while the applicant is not proposing to change the zoning on those two properties or proposed parcels, as well as the OCP designation of future development, they're not proposing to change those. But if council desires to change the zoning or the OCP designations on those proposed parcels, you're certainly able to do so, and changing those designations or the zoning in particular may give future councils or this council in future the opportunity to restrict development on those portions of the subject property where those hazardous areas have been identified. So that's not being proposed by the applicant, but it's certainly your option to do so as an amendment if you so choose.
Councillor Luck, you had questions for Mr. MacArthur? I mean, Councillor Richard, sorry.
My only question that I had was, can we put the no build covenant on there, or would that be an issue with the land title? Because I thought that was somewhere in the proposal from Rock Dock that was in here. Because if there was some of that part of the lot in remnant A and B, if there was a concern, can we change that with our zoning, or would it be something that would have to be done through land title? Or can we make that part of the amendment?
Yes, thank you. That is an option as well. So, of course, at the subdivision stage, if the rezoning were to be approved, a no-build covenant can be registered at time of subdivision. But if you want to make that a condition of the rezoning, that's certainly your option as well. So you can direct staff to enter into a negotiation or to have the applicant register a covenant on those hazardous lands, and certainly that does happen quite often at rezoning stage. So if you would like to direct staff to do so, you can certainly do that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. MacArthur? Councillor Luck.
It's like that might be a good time to ask the question, then what is a no-build covenant? What does that really look like for the landowner and for the city itself, Mr. MacArthur?
Yeah, so the covenant itself, and Mr. Smith might want to speak to that as well, but just briefly, a no-build covenant, a Section 219 covenant, would be registered on a portion of the lands, and in this case, it would be remainder Lot A and the remainder Lot B is what we're discussing. And though that covenant would indicate that those lands would not be able to be built on or developed as long as that covenant is on title. And of course that would be in favor of the city, and so the only way to remove that covenant would be for the city to release it in future. So that would give absolute certainty that those lands wouldn't be developed, whereas zoning gives, you know, some certainty, but certainly not as much as a covenant would.
Mr. Smith, would you like to add to that?
I would.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 points I want to make on this. One, for no-build covenants to be enforceable, you have to have some condition to that covenant. And so what you would include here is that until there's an engineer that indicates it's sufficient reporting or some plan that's been presented that it's safe for the use intended. So it wouldn't be a hard and fast, you can never build on that parcel. Otherwise that'd be council sterilizing parcels. And
that's what I was worried about.
Does not hold up very well with courts. And so you can include no builds, but it has to be reasonable conditions. And for this, we've had many discussions with these developers, and I think that that's not something that they will necessarily balk at. And while Don is correct that it's a possibility at the rezoning stage, it's much more common to address this through subdivision as some of the conditions of the subdivision, because really what they're trying to do with this subdivision, the future subdivision, I guess it'll be coming forward, but is hive off those parcels where building is safe and easy, and then leave those 2 remainder parcels where it's a little bit more complicated, and very likely that will be the solution imposed unless there's some other mechanism that equally satisfies the city. So I want to assure council we're very well aware of this, and that was why I think this process, as you guys are well aware, has taken so long. Is we wanted as a city to be satisfied with the mining reports, and quite honestly, I think everybody was well enlightened by that process. It ended up changing some of their plans. It ended up really cementing the understanding for the city as to where the potential risks lie and where they don't lie, most importantly, so that development can safely proceed where it makes sense. So I think that from staff perspective, subdivision would be the appropriate mechanism, and so long as you recognize there would be conditions on that no build.
Great answer. That's what I was looking for. I was worried about sterilizing the property and everything in the future, and then, you know, the developer, you have a difference of opinion, and where was that all going to go, right? But I really like the answer we got from Mr. Smith here, and I think that that would be good. Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. MacArthur? Councillor Richard.
I just wanted to confirm, because in the report, it was only talking about certain specific sections, and I think it was the remnant of the lots, not the whole property, obviously. That's the only thing I was mentioning is, you know, as we look in that area, which there's not a lot of homes in that area, except for what's been started development in 2007 or 8. There was only some areas noted, so I thought that was nice to see that report anyway. But that's all I was curious about, so thanks.
Thank you. And that wasn't a question. So I need a mover and a seconder that council give first reading to the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2339, 2022. Christofferson and White. Anybody want to speak to this? Councillor Fair.
Thank you. Just to comment, I think it's encouraging to see the developer recognizing the need for this change to M1. It's exactly the kind of development that we need to go along with our residential development and to make the city more financially stable in the long run. So just wanted to comment that I'm encouraged to see the developer recognizing that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. And that council gives second reading to the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2339, 2022. Mover and a seconder. White and Etchart. Anybody want to speak to this one? I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. and that council give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 2340, 2022. Luck and Christofferson. And any questions on the zoning side or comments? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. And that council gives second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 2340, 2022. White and Luck. And any comments? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. And the council directs staff to schedule a public hearing. White, Christofferson. And I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. One more. Oh, no. I think you're done. Aren't you, Mr. McCarthy? Yes, okay.
No,
he's
no.
You're still in
Don't
the
cut him
railroad?
off yet.
Okay. Okay. It is, sorry, the railway corridor, the railway project, railway corridor, hard to say with braces. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, this rezoning application, bylaw number 2338, pertains to the city-owned lands known as the railway corridor, or those lands that run adjacent to Colchana Avenue on the west side of the city. And staff are proposing that this city-owned property be rezoned from the current R2 zoning and P1 park zoning to R3 small parcel residential, as well as retaining that P1 zone for the park area. And then the small piece what would be east of Cleesby, when Cleesby Street is continued through or constructed through that corridor, that small little piece there be rezoned for medium density R7 to facilitate a future housing development there. The idea here, and thank you to Ms. Crowell as well, if she's still in the audience, for her comments, and I have spoken with her previously about BC Hydro's interest and those sorts of things, and of course she alluded to this project not being new at all. Urban Systems was contracted by the city back in 2014, in fact, to create a report which is attached to this report. And a number of options were considered at the time, including housing, including a multi-use path or some sort of trail, some parkland, and certainly that's what's envisioned for this proposal. So the idea would be that housing would be contained in the corridor from Main Street to Spring Street, so those that sort of 2-block stretch in that area. The housing itself would not take up the entire corridor either. The active transportation path, the West Merritt path that is grant funded, would run alongside the road on the frontage of these properties. So approximately a 4.5 meter wide corridor would be dedicated there for that active transportation multi-use path. That would leave approximately 15 meters or so for the lots. And of course, this R3 zone back in 2020, when council may recall that when we were discussing the zoning bylaw update, this R3 zone was amended with this corridor in mind. The idea here being that having these small lots, these 15-meter deep lots, would work really well with in conjunction with this active transportation multi-use path. And so the idea is to contain those housing lots from Main to Spring, and then from Spring Street to Cleesby, all of that land would be park, including the multi-use path that would veer into that corridor. So this would essentially be an extension of Fairley Park. And there would be land in there when we were doing the West Merritt active transportation grant proposal. You may also recall some of the other ideas that staff had suggested at the time, community garden, outdoor exercising equipment, a multi-use box court, these types of things. So whether there's future funding for those types of amenities in this Fairley Park extension from Spring to Cleesby, of course that will need to be planned and funded in future if those types of amenities are wanted. But certainly the active transportation path is planned to run through that corridor, and it would provide more green space on that side of the city. As Ms. Crowell also alluded to, this path will, the West Merritt active transportation path will connect to the river trail, and that is going to be reconstructed, of course, as well as in the future, if a Kettle Valley trail is created with the, obviously negotiation with TNRD and local First Nations, the West Merritt active transportation path will connect west of this site to the pedestrian bridge adjacent to the public works yard that crosses the river there. So there is that possibility of having a connection to the KVR as well, if that path becomes a reality. So the idea here is to have land for much needed housing. Of course, the 3D printing project is slated for this site if this rezoning is to go forward. And even if the rezoning weren't to go forward, there are ways to potentially develop that land for that housing project through leasehold strata, different means. The park, obviously land is, something that provides a community amenity, as well as accommodating the West Merritt active transportation path. So the idea here is to be able to have the best of all worlds, and hopefully staff have been able to develop this in a way that shows that, but certainly if changes are needed or desired, that's certainly something that can happen as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. MacArthur?
I have one. Are community gardens considered a park?
Community gardens, Your Worship, can be in a park space. They can be in other zones that are not park space as well. For example, in our institutional zones, we allow community gardens as a use. And of course, we saw a community garden created at the high school in the past. So you don't need to have a community garden in a park, but a park can accommodate a community garden.
Thank you. I was just recognizing that the R7 affordable housing spot, I think, is what we were thinking of when we had the previous plan. I like the idea of moving it into affordable housing. On the other hand, I don't want to lose that concept of a community garden down in that area either. So knowing that it can be put in, all we need is cash, right? A whole bunch of it.
Yeah, but it can be done afterwards, so thank you. Any other questions for Mr. MacArthur?
Seeing none, I'm going to ask that council give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 2338, 2022. I need a mover and a seconder. Luck and White. Any debate on this issue? Councillor Fair.
Yeah, to Ms. Prowell's point again, I recognize that it would be a nice spot for a little bit of a park. However, I think we do have in that area in particular, like Vote Park is quite underutilized. So adding some affordable housing, which we desperately need, to the area also, I think, gives more motivation, for lack of a better term, to the city developing Vote Park into more of a usable area too. So in the long run, I don't think we're going to lose out on green space. I think it'll give us opportunity to develop it better.
Well said. Councillor Luck.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, echo Councillor Fair's comments as well. As I think I think in small cities like ours, is that mixed use is really, really important going on here. So we get that park space and that affordable housing piece is really, really important moving here. But I do look forward to the public hearing coming up on this and see what the public has to say on it as well, and see how they feel about these kind of developments moving into the city. I think they're a really important piece. So thank you very much for bringing this forward.
And seeing no other comments, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. And I need a mover and seconder that council gives second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 2338, 2022. Christopherson Etchart. And any debate on this? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. And that council directs staff to schedule a public hearing. Mover and seconder. Christopherson, White. And all in favor? Opposed? None. Okay. Moving right along. We're now on 8.4. And Dawn, this was your last one then, right? I don't want to say it was when it wasn't. Thank you. And
thanks very much.
And I'll move on to Sean Smith for the staff report.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is in relation to a temporary borrowing bylaw to bring services out to exit 286. I think that in talking with one member of council, didn't we already do this? There's a whole bunch of bylaws that feel like they're doing the same thing that have slightly minute differences, and I'll try to kind of tease that apart as best as possible. So at the last, not the last council meeting, but on April 19th, 2022, you passed a loan authorization bylaw, which would enable the city to borrow up to $7.554 million to bring this infrastructure out to exit 286. That being said, the loan authorization is a step of the process that gives us authority to borrow, but we don't have the ability to make draws on that until we either go to temporary borrowing or long-term borrowing, both of which you need to set up by bylaw. So one is the authority, and then to actually go do the thing, you have a separate process. So that's where we're at right now. The city has received a certificate of approval for that loan authorization bylaw. So that means that the bylaw goes through its quashing period, and that's when the inspector for municipalities certifies that this bylaw can't be challenged. So it gives MFA certainty when it goes to the borrowing process. What we're proposing right now is that council give first 3 readings to the temporary borrowing bylaw, noting that there are still some items outstanding that we will need to address before any draws would be made under this temporary borrowing bylaw. First, I will say, is the potential for project overages that, again, I think that you guys have heard about this enough now and what the strategy is. It's probably starting to get old, but we have to run things in a very particular order in order to be able to have enough project certainty from the developer's point of view, while still making sure that the city is secured and protected as it comes to those potential dollars. So in particular, the developers are hesitant at this point to give an unequivocal, yes, we will pay for all overages, and we will put up a letter of credit for, let's say, some large sum of money until they get to the tendering process, but they can't get to the tendering process until they have some commitment from the city that the funds are actually available. So it creates something of a chicken and the egg item that we are working very hard to thread a line to make sure that we stay secure and we can also proceed with this process. So that's why the timing on this is very important. What we're proposing is 3 readings at this meeting today, at which point we would continue working with the parties to complete the project engineering for this project. And at the same time as we bring the temporary borrowing bylaw back for adoption, we would show you a draft overage financing agreement that would have substantially all of the terms that will be included, with the exception of a potentially different dollar value for what the actual letter of credit would be that would allow the city to borrow or to take from the letter of credit in order to advance this project. And the reason on that is if the tender comes in at a sufficient valuation, maybe we can get away with a smaller letter of credit, whereas if it's a larger, maybe we don't do the project. If it's in between, maybe you'll need a larger letter of credit. And so they would need some degree of flexibility. So at that meeting, when we come to you asking for authority for the temporary borrowing bylaw, we would also be asking for authority to enter into the agreement on substantially those terms, acknowledging that we would also be seeking the flexibility to amend the letter of credit values as needed in order to ensure sufficient security on the project. We would also be proposing adoption of that temporary borrowing bylaw at that meeting, which would give the developers the security to say, yes, those funds are available, so now we can go out to tender on the project. So we would go out to tender issuance likely in September is what we would be looking at. Then the tender selection period would be in September to October. So once we have those valuations from tender, we would very quickly be finalizing that overage agreement with the developer having already received authority from council to enter into that agreement, and then we would move through to completion of the work. So I recognize that this sounds complicated, and that's because it is, actually. It sounds complicated, and it is complicated. It is. And we've had to work through a lot of different implications. Can't thank Norman enough for his work liaising with MFA and the ministry in order to get to a spot where we're going to be well protected as a municipality and still be able to allow continuity of the project. The other thing that council has raised previously, of course, is the downstream allocation, which will be addressed through the city's DCC bylaw. We're working through that now. The developers are aware that we're likely, again, I don't want to say this for sure because this will be in consultation with council and the developers, but likely implementing an area-specific DCC for the Exit 286 development, which will implement different rates for those parcels than it would for the rest of the city, given the significant amount of new infrastructure that wouldn't otherwise be required but for that development. We will also be working on the developers on the other portions for anything that may need to be upgraded through the line that would be at a much smaller attribution to the developers. So we're working through that process now, and that will be tied in with the subdivision side. So staff is comfortable that we've got the necessary securities in place, and we're asking now for authority to move forward with this temporary borrowing bylaw, as that's a necessary element for us to be able to go out to tender on the project.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Smith? Councillor White.
I just want to clarify that the DCCs are going to cover what we need extra for sewer on this side and water.
They're not going to cover everything we need. There will be a massive amount of city contribution that will not be covered by DCC, but those are all costs that would be required to bear even if Exit 286 wasn't developed. Because the whole point of DCCs is that it doesn't cover the replacement of infrastructure. It will cover anything that's new or any upgrades that are required. So if we have an old pipe, we're still responsible. The city from municipal funds would be required to replace that old pipe. They would be, DCCs might kick in the difference for upgrading the size of that pipe when you have to implement a new one, but they wouldn't be covering all of the costs of the downstream development, only the portions that are directly attributable.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've got three questions and concerns about a couple
give your first one first, and then we'll go to Councillor Richard.
Sounds good. So the first one is the downstream upgrades and everything, and thank you for addressing it, Mr. Smith. But my concern is we have no idea what these costs are going to be at this point and what kind of report. I haven't seen a report on where these downstream, so I'm a little hesitant, a little worried about that. I'd really like to see some, even if it's just some preliminary costing, what some of these downstream costs are going to be and what the plan is of downstream. What do we have to upgrade? Is it the treatment plan? Because I know we're going to get that from the public, and we're already hearing that from the public. You're putting that in, we're going to have to rebuild our treatment plant.
This is a question. for Mr. Smith,
It's
right?
coming, Mayor. Thank you. Yeah, so all these things that are coming together, we're getting those concerns out there in the public. Are we going to be able to get a report that gives us some preliminary costs of the downstream impact here and what we're looking at, what infrastructure is going to have to be upgraded? I think we need that. I really do. And I'm at that point where I really like to see that because I'm just a little concerned about the size of this project there. And so that's my number one question.
Sure. Thank you very much, through your worship, to Councillor Luck. So are we at a spot where we know exactly what it's going to look like? No, as you're well aware. You have seen preliminary costing, but it is very preliminary, I'll say that.
If it's 6 months old, it's dated.
We've had a conversation with the engineer on this, that what we would like to do is go out for not specific design, but do feasibility with probably a part 2 specific design, because we'll need to know the exact pathing this is going to take, how it's going to be allocated as it runs through the area. And so we need that certainty as well. And that ultimately is going to be built into the DCC projects for this specific area. And so, yes, you are right that we don't have certainty on this. The thing that I will say is it significantly reduces the degree of apprehension that when we look at this as a full build-out project, and if it were to all show up in the next 2 years, we would be in really hot water.
We would be in hot water.
That is not how this is going to proceed, and we have some ability to control that and work with the developers on that. And so the lion's share of the we'll call the service loading will be coming from the residential associated with Palomino, and we've had every assurance that they're looking at a 20-year build out for this project. And so there would be opportunities to bring forward those critical elements early, especially once they're in the DCC bylaw, and we have some time to map this out. That being said, I'm with you. We would all love perfect certainty as to what this is going to look like, and you've had some indications from the sewer master plan and our preliminary costing, but I don't have specifics on you or for you on that.
Okay.
But yeah, I can say that we are going out, and we will be having a bid for putting that feasibility and work together.
Councillor Etchart.
That actually ties in really well with my question, because I was just thinking, if we're putting in the service to the 286, some of the residents that live along the road there on Joyaska, Sterling Road and whatnot, will the residents there, will the bands maybe want to tie into our water? Has that come up in discussions?
So water is a bit tougher because the water is currently running through the southeast reservoir. Would you be able to pull up an EGIS for me on this, Sean? It's running along the southeast reservoir line. So if you can imagine, there's a Trans Mountain right-of-way just that kind of follows the edge of our municipal boundary. Yeah, we can probably work it with Google Maps. Are you okay if I step away from the... Zoom in for me, Sean, to right here. So this is our southeast reservoir. The water line runs through here and will run down and connect with a higher reservoir on their property, whereas you're talking about the sewer line, which they're currently proposing running along the road to service Joyaska. So the answer in short, Councillor Etchart, is there would be opportunities for connection, particularly on the sewer. Not that there wouldn't be a possibility on the water, but it would be more likely that you would run it around and actually drop it down. And so there isn't any imminent plans on that, but it may allow for the possibility in the future. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yep. Nope. I was just curious. Thanks.
Any other comments? Councillor Luck, did you have a couple more?
I understand there's a report somewhere hiding detailing on-site servicing. There was a report done. I don't know if it was done by Urban Systems. Somebody mentioned it to me. I don't know. It might be hearsay, whatever. But there was a report done where if this area was to get developed, that there could be some on-site servicing. I think they probably meant more about the sewer rather than bringing the line up. Have you seen or heard anything about it? It's just a question. Like I say, you get these things thrown at you, and then you just got to ask the question.
So I presume what you're referring to is wells and septic?
I think probably more septic, but our sewer systems or self-contained sewer systems, they weren't sure, but they thought there was a report done some years ago about how to self-contained service that area.
Yeah, there has been discussion of that historically, and I won't purport to be an expert on the historical discussion, so I'll let you know what I know. There's two challenges with it. There's some issues with water quality in the area, as I understand it, and they were having some difficulties meeting water quality standards there, and it was looking like there was going to need to be some significant upgrades in order to meet sufficient water quality standards. The second was really around scaling, and so there probably was opportunity for on-site servicing for leaving it with water and septic at a certain size, density, and scale. That was going to be more problematic if there was going to be significant residential components to the development. So it's my understanding with it. I also know that there was lots of discussion around the city's bylaw that requires connection if you're in municipal boundaries. I think that those issues are surmountable. I'm in no way completely unopposed to exploring it where it's leapfrog development. Like, that presents challenges for the city as well. Yes. We don't love long routes of infrastructure that have very little in between. It's generally not economical for the city, and like, council's well aware that this will be our asset at the end, and it will be council's responsibility to maintain that. That's a challenge. So these are good questions to be asking. You know, I think that this has long been what has called into question the economic viability of development at the site in general. So there's been lots of discussions. I do not purport to be the expert as to whether that would work for the existing plans or not, but
I know in their existing, or their first plan that they provided for us, it had their own site servicing potential there. But since then, they have not put it in their plan at all.
Yeah, I strongly suspect that at the scale that we're looking at here, would be very difficult, but.
No, you've detailed a couple of issues. Like I say, it was thrown at me, so I thought, I'm here to ask the questions. That's what I'm elected to do. So I wanted to ask the questions and find out what's going on. Because if there is a better way than spending 7.5, and I'm getting you, we're talking probably 9 million before this is done, with the rate of inflation, everything going now, it would have been easier to do that, and maybe in the future look at connecting to the city and made environments. But anyway, it's been looked at, I'm guessing. If it hasn't, probably somebody should do a quick view at it and see if it is at all feasible anymore. But I'm just here to ask the questions. That's my job. Yep. So really appreciate the response on that, and that's what we need to understand.
Would it be helpful to council if I issue that as an item and I can report back at a future meeting?
I would appreciate it.
Because certainly we'll pitch it to the engineers. I know this has been hashed. It's just I'm not familiar with the answer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll forego my third question. I think it's kind of been answered in the discussion. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Where are we? I'd like a mover and a seconder that council read water and sanitary sewer services to Gateway 286, temporary borrowing bylaw number 2241, 2022, a first time. Christofferson and Etcher, and any discussion?
So what are our fail-safes on this again, Mr. Smith? I just want to, because there's a lot of money at risk here. There's a lot of things happening here, and I just want to know if we pass this tonight or put this where we're putting it today, we still got back-out clauses in here that we're going to be safe on, should something happen.
Mr. Smith.
I don't know if that's the right language I should be using, but
I understand the intent.
There's a lot of money, and once this $7.5 million gets pulled out, that's money that we can't borrow for other projects in the community either. So I just gotta get a level of comfort here.
So the first fail-safe is this will go to tender. Yeah. This project, if that tender value is way out of whack with 7.5, we come back and have another conversation. The project doesn't run, we don't borrow a thing. That is by far your biggest fail-safe in this process, is that we're not tendering it in pieces, we're tendering the entire project all at once, so that you don't run into a project where you say, oh, wait a sec, how did this happen? We ended up $3 million over budget. Oops. That's the biggest fail-safe. With that as well, we're adding in the component that we talked about where the developers are amenable to entering into a cost overage agreement. So if we run over 7.55 as a result of change orders, which happen on a project, we don't want to minimize that, that we will have both their contractual agreement to pay it, but also a letter of credit to be able to draw down on that if they fail to pay it. So that is the critical security that would allow us to make sure that we will be made whole for that component. And then again, as we talked about, the second component, it will be done through development cost charges and building permit time.
Good, thank you. Sorry, Mayor, I shouldn't have asked the question when that piece had already passed, but I just wanted to let judges know that this is a big project. There's as detailed in the report some risk, but I'm prepared at this point. We have those fail safes in there, so I'm prepared at this point to support this moving forward, and looking forward to some reports, some accounts from staff as well on it. So thank you.
Thank you. The third part to your question was, do we have the capacity to be able to borrow, and how is that going to affect us? And Mr. Anderson brought a report to us, I don't know how many months ago, that said we have a lot of capacity in our borrowing ability, and this would not have had any impact on that ability to have us borrow over the next little while. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I want to just add one slight nuance to that, Your Worship, if you're okay. It will absolutely have an impact. It will not put us in a position where you're going to be able to not borrow. My understanding is it was 47 to 60%, but that was using previous numbers. Now that your revenue has changed, the calculations will all change, so it might end up being 44 to 56% or something like that now.
Yeah. Of our borrowing capacity.
Correct. So you aren't without borrowing capacity, but it definitely affects it. The one thing that council, I believe, is well aware of, and I didn't highlight in this, is that one of the parties does intend to commute their payment with cash up front, which will very likely minimize the overall debt load from the city. But again, they need to move forward with the project C that it's happening before they would do that. So that's part of why we're doing temporary borrowing as opposed to going directly to long-term, so that it would allow them to commute or to reform the local area service so that it's just on the backs of the single party. So, yeah, lots of moving pieces.
So any other comments? Councillor Etchart.
I think when Director Anderson was still here, he had mentioned something about doing the first 10-year financing agreement below 2%. I think it was just over 1. It wasn't very high.
It wasn't very high at all.
And I think, I don't know how long they honor that finance term if it's with the interest.
Yeah.
But I think it's still reasonable because the MFA finance rates were quite attractive. So, and then I think the finance rate over the, seem to remember something like 402,000 over the 30-year, maybe it was more than that, or maybe it was 402 over the 10-year term, but it was reasonable. Mm-hmm. And the total borrowing percentage was somewhere in the 40s, so that was reasonable, something like that. But anyway, but it was there, and he seemed positive about it at the time, so.
Yeah, it was. And
maybe it was a finance meeting even, anyway, that could be.
No, I think it was brought to a public meeting. So I don't see any other comments. I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. And I want to move her in a second that the council read water and sanitary sewer services to Gateway 286 temporary borrowing bylaw number 2241 2022 a second time. I think I got Etchart and White. Any comments on the second reading? Seeing none, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. And that council read water and sanitary sewer services to Gateway 286 temporary borrowing bylaw number 2241 2022 a third time. Mover, seconder. Fair. Christofferson. And any final debate for the evening? For the evening. All in favor? Opposed? None. Now on to new business. We have the late agenda item, which was the 9.1 Nicola Valley Arts Council report on painting. And Mr. Smith, are you going to just address this one? Oops.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for considering this item. So you'll note that this is done significantly different in that you've got a pseudo staff report in the description section. And so under the City of Merritt sign bylaw, much to my chagrin, council approves all murals. And I think that there will be a day where it maybe makes less sense to do this, because I think that there's a mechanism that you can cut council out entirely. Municipalities tend to think that this is necessary to make sure that like hateful murals don't go up in the community. I tend to believe that doesn't typically happen, and if it does, community outcry will bring it down faster than council ever will. And so I just think that there's an opportunity to cut this portion of the process out, but while it still exists, I will serenade you with the wonders of murals. Really, we're very happy to see the Nicola Valley Arts Council eager and excited to run some beautification projects around the city. And they are proposing 6 different locations for the placement of murals. One is at the Rotary Park band shell, and council, do you have this in your information package? You've seen the pictures associated with this. So the idea from the Arts Council, as I understand it, is really to create interactive murals wherever possible, things that will create photo opportunities that might be fun tourist draws, and will again add and give people reason to engage with our public spaces in fun ways. And so you see some of the designs that have been put forward there. Similarly for the Rotary Park bathroom, the Lions Park bathroom, Breathe Bikes, Sinfully Sugared, and Interior Savings Credit Union. And so if there are any questions in particular about what their goals or aims are to accomplish, I'm happy to speak to them. But I think that from what I've heard from council historically, I want to speak to one particular component about what we see kind of city involvement being moving forward. If council were to grant approval for these, there's still some items that are outstanding. And one, I think that we need to make sure that anybody getting murals done has a few things in place. One, they've got the approval of the owner of the building and the tenants of the building if a tenant is in place. So I think both of those are important. Owner is certainly the only one that is required at law, but we're not wanting to get in the way of and create problems where they don't need to exist. So we want all parties to that building being on board with this. As well, there needs to be an agreement between the parties as to what's going to happen with those murals, who will retain ownership, what the rights and responsibilities in relation to those murals are. So for example, who can use this in promotional materials, in advertising, who's responsible for maintenance, what happens when that mural, we're ready to do something else with that mural. This isn't an obligation to keep it in perpetuity. Maybe it's an obligation to keep it up for a period of years, 5 years, 10 years, at which point the owner would have the right to do what they want with it. So we're not forcing those terms, but we are suggesting that lest we run into, challenges with murals, that those be in place between the owners, the Arts Council, and potentially the city if necessary on that portion of the agreement. And we want to ensure that if the person is being paid or contracted to do that work, that it's clear who retains, again, ownership and rights in relation to that. So that's kind of what we would like our limited involvement to be, is we'll just work with you to make sure that all of the necessary elements are in place. We could potentially help with templates, etc. Because we want to have these community assets be a really positive thing into the future, especially when it comes time to start doing some maintenance or relocation or painting over, etc. So I want to again add here that the ones that would be on city buildings, the intent would be that they would be on removable frames. So that is the information that I have available for you, and you can take it where you would like it to go.
Any questions for Mr. Smith?
It's not a question, it's just a comment.
Okay, can we move on to Councillor Fair? Oh, sorry, Councillor Fair.
Thank you. Just considering that I own the business that's at Breathe Bikes, I should recuse from the votes of number 2 while voting on number 1. So.
Okay, we'll do them separately then.
Yeah.
Councillor White.
I don't have a problem with the murals. What my concern is, though, that there's a number of groups in the community. We have an economic development committee. We've got various groups. We've got tourism plans that have been done by the city that don't contain anything like this. And for one group to make this decision, I think is not really, it's not really a good thing. Especially with, like I say, with the Economic Development Committee. There's various groups that have concerns with, or well, not concerns, but should have an input into what is happening here, what the theme is there a theme, is there, and so.
Is there a question there?
Well.
The debate's coming afterwards. We haven't got the motion yet in front of us.
Okay, then let me ask the question, has there been any other groups approached with this project?
No.
Okay, and
I shouldn't say that, not from the city side. They may have been approached by the Arts Council, but I can't speak to that.
Murals has come up numerous times in the past.
Has it ever?
Yeah, I know. Can we have a motion or a resolution? I need a mover and a seconder that we, I guess we're going to do one at a time. Or no, can we do all of them except Breathe Bikes to start off with?
That's like you got structured, 2 resolutions.
Yeah. So I need a mover and a seconder for all of them except Breathe Bikes.
I'll move to approve them.
Yeah, so Christofferson and Etcher. And now debate. Councillor Christofferson and then Councillor White.
Yeah, first of all, I really like the idea that they are mounted onto buildings rather than painted right on the building, because maintenance is often a real issue there. So I'm very much in favor of that. And probably this isn't the only organization that will be offering to do murals and so on. So I'm really pleased that the Arts Council has stepped up to do this, but that doesn't preclude anybody else from doing so. So I really like the project. I think it's good for Merritt and will do make it a more attractive place to be.
Councillor White.
I like the project. I just think that there should be other input. Otherwise, we're going to have every group in town willy-nilly doing whatever. We've got other murals that were taken down that haven't been put back up yet. And I'm not against the project at all. I just think that we have other groups in place, which are city groups, actually, the Economic Development Committee. And so everybody's all the rest of them are being put aside. There's no communication with the tourism plans that we've spent thousands of dollars on. And I just think there should be more groups involved in it and have a little bit more say than one group picking what should happen here. Thanks.
Anybody else? I think I'd like to, okay, Councillor Richard.
The reason that I support the Arts Council doing this is that the Arts Council has such a diverse group of people that are there. You get some people that make wicker baskets and some people that are making murals out of different canvas, and just such a diverse group of people, and the membership is available to just about anyone. So my thought in supporting this would be that anyone with artistic ability that can draw, because I know I sure as hell don't, that those people would be members of the Arts Council, and they seem the most talented group to do something like that. Councillor White has an interesting point. Maybe there's other people, maybe there's a plumber out there that's a fantastic at doing murals too. But I just think that we have the right people doing the right job, and that's why I support it. Thank you.
Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm always excited when groups of people want to come forward and do things in our community and everything, and this one's no different here. And I do like the concept and the idea, but I think Councillor White is onto something here. And I'm wondering, I think, Mr. Smith, you were going back and suggesting that we look at, no, I'm not asking a question, we're in debate. So I think Mr. Smith was suggesting he look at some rules around this kind of thing. And I'm wondering if maybe it should be the Nicola Valley Arts Council that is the head of looking after murals in the community, so that we do have it in one place rather than all over the place with all these different groups that are going to be doing it. Because you know, you're going to get maybe the Hells Angels roll through here and want to put a couple of murals up, and you know, it's a bad example, but it could happen. Or the Plumbers Association, right? So, is there somebody that will coordinate this thing and make sense? Otherwise, we're going to get requests. Does that?
Perfect example. Well, I know. I just nailed it.
Exactly. I mean.
Mr. Smith.
So if I can just add two things. So one, I will say that there are diverse approaches to art in communities. Like, if there's one thing that I can guarantee will extract the strongest opinions, talk about art in a community. It's like, absolutely. Wow, really strong opinions.
Or cats.
And kind of communities they're everywhere in the spectrum, but the two extremes are kind of like, the only way art works is if you let it flow. Like, that's public art. Like, just let it come.
Absolutely.
Get out of the way, government. And there might be some truth to that. I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. If you have to get 17 permits in order to put a piece of art up, you're like, that doesn't jive with most art people. And so that's the other end of the spectrum. Can we be somewhere in the middle of that, which I think is what Councillor White is getting at, is saying, hey, let's not go hog wild willy-nilly here. And so that's why really the loan provision that exists is council has to approve it, and you have to think it generally looks nice. Like, literally, it's pretty close to what the bylaw says, which is crazy and invites all kinds of tough discussions. But what I really wanted to highlight here is, in your strategic plan, one of the items was, in addition to talking about an annual contribution to the Arts Council, it was setting up a more formal partnership with the Arts Council to support public art. And so part of our discussions with the Arts Council has been, because we've had this discussion before, that, hey, wouldn't it be nice if the Arts Council was kind of a bit more of the voice for how things went and looked. And so I am in no way proposing what council should do, but I thought or felt that this was sort of consistent with the trajectory of what council had been asking in the strategic plan. So if you can take it wherever you want to go with it, that's the beauty of being on council. And I will listen to whatever you say.
I think Councillor Fair has not had a chance to do the first comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a pretty straightforward comment. I think this is an initiative that will improve and beautify the city, and I don't think it has really any potential to hinder any other initiative to improve and beautify the city. So I really don't think that it has to be too complicated of an issue, and I'm in support of it.
Thank you. And Councillor Christopherson.
Just want to make a comment that authorizing the Arts Council to do this project isn't precluding anybody else from wanting to do it. There are some suggestions here that murals be done on panels that can be attached to a building and so on. We've had lots of other artists in town that have done murals on buildings that have been done by owners without coming to the city even. So what? I think if people are willing to step forward and have a good plan, get out of the way.
Councillor White.
My whole point is, it is not a one group decision. When all those murals in town were painted, they were painted by a group, a city group, and a Walk of Stars, and a mural group, and a downtown business association that made those decisions. Yes, they were, Kurt.
Okay,
They were.
let's not get into an argument here. State your point of view, and that's it. Councillor Etchart, and I'll finish it off after
Just
you.
because we're beating this
Yeah.
to a pulp. I think the whole idea is, I agree with Councillor White, it's nice to offer this to everybody. But that's what we've noticed is that because everything's painted on and not having it detached, if you have to replace part of the exterior wall, then you're ruining someone's mural. Or we had one painted over the Elvis one on the side of the hotel a number of years ago by the liquor or cold beer and wine, I think, on the side. So I can appreciate the concerns there because there's an artist that was commissioned and the royalty. Anyway, I think the idea of having something going forward that we can have something detachable, because maybe you have to do maintenance, maybe there's been damage to the building, maybe you need to replace some site. I think the idea of having something detached is
Well, the ones that were self-standing were taken down by the city.
yeah. Because of the problems that we've had in the past moving forward, I think it's nice to have a plan. We can have them detached and taken down in case we have to do repairs or maintenance or paint, whatever. And I think it's just being prudent going forward for everybody, no matter who does the piece. Maybe it's whoever.
I'm not arguing
Yeah. No.
at all.
No. Thank you.
Okay. Are we going to paint them or not paint them? That is the question. I'm all for painting them. I just think we need some diversity in the town. This is the arts group. They too have a right to be able to put art around our city. And I actually will, we've got that in our strategic plan. We want them to put art around our city. So I'm going to call the question on everyone except Breathe Bikes. All in, do I have a motion? Yes, I do. Okay, yeah, all in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Carried. And for Breathe Bikes? Yeah, we're right here anyways, just don't vote on it. So on the Breathe Bikes one? No, not good enough?
You've got a lot of power, but you can't beat the statute.
Sorry, Travis, I tried. Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for Breathe Bikes. Okay, so Christopherson and Luck, and any comments on this one? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. You're calling him back, Norman? Thank you. Now I bet we have to wait for him to get in. We are now at notices of motion. Does anyone have a notice of motion? Nope. Okay, we move on to reports from council. Anybody have a report? Councillor White.
I'd like to report on the airport day, which was a huge success. We had over 1,000 people in and out all day long, and the helicopter rides from 2 in the afternoon until 4:45, and people ate donuts and cotton candy and hamburgers and hot dogs and bannock. And Mayor Brown was there. She opened the event along with Dan Albus and Jackie Taggart, and it was just a great day, and all went well.
Thank you. Any other report? See, now we'll move on to the information items. There's two, actually there's one letter of support, but the Nicola Valley Pro Rodeo is looking for a sponsorship option. And in talking to Mr. Thompson, our finance guru, today, he did say there was a sponsorship line in our budget that had $2,000 remaining, unspent. I know, unspent. Isn't that something? It doesn't mean to say that's the number, but I'm just saying that that's what we have in that one line. So does anyone want to take a stab at a motion on this? Mr. Smith.
So I'll defer to Norm on this, but my understanding is that between your grant and aid, your sponsorship, and your council contingency, you're currently sitting at $12,000. And note that you've got this, you've got what's coming with the request for the next meeting with a roof and other things. So just to kind of let you guys know where you're at, some years you have cash in spades. This year you don't have cash in spades, you have less. So you can, there's options still outside of that, but just to put you in terms of where you're at for kind of the rest of the year for all things, you're in the $12,000 mark.
You sure know how to put a downer on things, don't you? I'm kidding.
Well, if you want to be on budget,
the roof, I would not have assumed that the roof would have even been considered under council, under a council account, but I will leave that for you. Okay? Does anyone have?
You could be right, they can come from wherever you tell us. That's the beauty.
Councillor Christopherson?
I move that the gold sponsorship that we usually have down.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, Luck. And any debate on this? Councillor Echard.
No, I think it's a great thing to support the rodeo since it was one of our major events before any kind of festivals were here. But really, I think the details are all there. It's really popular. Yeah, I support it because of all the ranchers and all the equine activity that's around the Nicola Valley. It's a nice thing to do and supports everybody, reaches everybody. Thank you.
Councillor Fair.
I also want to and likely will support this sponsorship. I think it's a good time for us to recognize that we may have to make tough choices for these kinds of things in the near future. Just a statement. Thank you.
I think our CAO was trying to tell us today is that day for the tough choices. Councillor Luck.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I like what Councillor Christopherson done then. I'd like to support that one, but may I suggest maybe another $500 in there and do the steer wrestling presented by you? You get all the same things that the gold sponsor does, but you also get the every time the steer wrestling is done, the city of Merritt will sponsor that. So I'm just wondering if you'd mind amending your motion to add another $500 there and do a very specific event. Just a suggestion. Because you get everything in the you get everything in the gold, plus you're going to get mentioned every time it's out there for an extra $500. I just trying to upsell it a little bit here.
And Councillor Luck is the seconder on your motion, so if you agree to it.
Yeah, I'm just throwing out there as an idea.
No pressure. I'm not.
But no
trying to
pressure
put
at all.
Do we not get that with the $2,000?
Well, you get everything in the 2,000, the gold sponsor, right? The 2-day passes, the 8 grandstands, the 2 sponsor rooms, all that. Plus, you're going to be doing a specific item that's going to be mentioned every time that event's held. Steer wrestling presented by the city of Merritt. And that's, yeah, so you just get a little bit more for the 500. Just an idea.
We just need a quick yes or no. Okay.
And I'll accept that amendment.
So,
As long as it comes out of council, that's stipend.
All right, that's fine too.
and while we're at the same motion, then I'd like to also mention that we have in the past these 8 grandstand passes. We put them out in a raffle for all of staff. Staff put their names in, and they. Yep. Mr. Smith has an issue with that. I see.
No, I've got 0 issues. Okay. My question is, do you want us to see? Is there a particular event you want us to talk with them about, or should we just leave it up to them?
Well, this is for the steer wrestling presented. If you look at event sponsor, for example, oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we could do the steer wrestling. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of events.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you just want us to?
I like the steer wrestling.
To slap them in on one.
At their discretion.
Okay. I mean, you guys haven't decided it yet, but just so I know what we would be asking for.
Yeah.
Okay, and seeing no, are you commenting again?
No, sorry.
Okay, seeing no other comments, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Okay, and the other one, the other one on the information items is for Mr. Strang to speak to, which is the flood recovery. The other one is a letter of support. That's just there for your information.
Okay. Thanks, Your Worship. Hold on, I just got to set up the camera here. Running both. So just wanted to give a quick update tonight on the recovery team's housing projects that are going forward or that we're working on making go forward. So a little bit of background here. Of course, we all know the floods, the date of the floods, and the fact that the floods resulted in a lot of people that were displaced from their housing, either because they were in a rental suite or because their houses are no longer fit for accommodation and need substantial repairs. So as a result of that, staff and mayor and council went forward to a number of different agencies and was able to secure a fairly significant amount of funding from the BC provincial government through municipal affairs, who has given us just shy of $12 million tagged for some housing projects. And the 2 main projects that they've heavily supported out of all the options that we've put forward are the procurement of some mobile homes as transitional housing for the 18 to 24 month time period, and then a 3D printed house development, which is more of a kind of leading edge project that other people haven't done before. They were kind of curious if it could be done in other flood affected communities or fire affected communities, and we kind of got the nod to be proponents of this and do the feasibility study. And then we also came up with another program for accessory suites, subsidization and helping people with technical expertise to develop some more secondary suites and accessory suites in town. So just, this is more of an information update. There's no vote, there's no question on this one, but we just wanted to keep council advised. The mobile home program, it is still in between the RFP and the award stage, so we're not able to release public information on bidders or pricing or anything quite at that stage. But more or less, we sent out an RFP for delivery of 30 to 40 mobile home units for delivery in the late summer time period. So August 1st to October 31st is what our targeted window is. We did receive some bidders. No bidder qualified on all of the metrics that we were looking for, but we received enough interest in the bid that we were able to probably come up with an option to go forward with here. So we are looking at likely closing out an agreement with one or more of those suppliers in the next week or two here, and then we'll have a little more information at that point. We're looking for targeted delivery likely between September 1st and October 31st at this point. Excuse me. And it will be deployed in town as well. The cost of these units is going to land installed, all found cost, between about $210,000 and $250,000 per unit. And then the residents that are getting put into those or given an opportunity to be placed in those accommodations have been identified through our support center. So our support center has worked one-on-one with, they've knocked on the door of every single flood affected house. They've got contact lists through the Red Cross. So they've been in contact with every single person. There's really encouraging signs on that front. So we currently have, I don't remember the exact numbers here. It's at the top of the report. There's 456 households that are receiving supports of some sort. 49 households in commercial accommodation, 61 households in billeting and other rental arrangements. So as we're going through and as the recovery team, the sports center team is going through, they're contacting every single one of those and telling them about the program. A lot of those people had the encouraging news that they were weeks away from maybe moving into their own house, or at least a couple months away from moving into their own house, and didn't need that kind of longer term transitional housing. And Red Cross has signaled the willingness to support these people until they can get back in their own homes. So that was really good news for us. We have identified well over 3 dozen people who may need some sort of transitional housing and may need some financial help for some sort of transitional housing as well. So that is what we are proceeding with this particular program, is for those individuals who need it. And there was a number of different priorities in terms of what we looked at or what the support center looked at for placing those individuals, including, are they out of community? Do they need time to work on their own home? What the end result of that is going to be. So the program is going to proceed forward. Contract is not done quite yet. It'll likely be an 18 to 24 month transitional period. After that 18 to 24 month period, this is going to be a hard cap, i.e. we don't want to be in the long-term business of, the city being a landlord. So we will be structuring the agreement so that is not the case. After this transitional period, we really want to see people either back in their own homes, or if they're amenable to the home that they're in, that they find financing and move forward with the purchase of that. So they will be offered, who's ever in that unit will be offered the first right of purchase for these units, and then if not, they will go up at market rate to add to the existing housing stock in Merritt. I think that's most of that program. The next update, like I said, on mobile homes, will probably have a little bit more hard numbers once the contracts have been awarded and everything's been signed up. Is there any questions on that particular one, maybe before I move to the next one?
Any questions for Mr. Strang on the mobile homes? Councillor Chart.
The mobile homes, are they all being set up as new manufactured units, or are they secondhand, any of them, or?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Chart, through the Mayor. They are all brand new manufactured homes, manufactured to the mobile home standard of Z240. I know all sorts of things that I wouldn't have known in accounting, but yes, they are all brand new. There's
Z240, CSA 277.
You know what? I'm not even surprised that you know that.
Of course I would. Yeah, but
brand new. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so they're new units. Oh,
Any other questions? I have, on the number has changed for me. I somehow had a number of 84 households that were out, and that's the number I've been giving to the press, but this one brings in 110. So I'm okay with using that number. My question was, are all the people that are needing units between the mobile home, finishing their own home, and the potential for 3D housing? And 3D housing is an issue that I don't know if you just said it or not, but it's not yet.
Your worship, I can get to the 3D printed housing in the next one here with a little bit of a timeline update and project update, if that's okay with you.
And I just wanted to ask, is there anybody who doesn't have access to a home that needs a home? That was my question.
At this point, the support center is signaling that we will be able to fulfill the immediate need of transitional housing. We do highly suspect that once this program goes forward and people see, individuals moving into a home, that there will be an additional, a second tranche or an influx of people, as it were, that put their hands up for some housing. So we are expecting further. We basically took everybody and kind of tailored this to be able to, the numbers worked out fairly well to be able to tailor this to the number of people that it would be appropriate for.
Okay. I think that was the only question maybe it was the only question I had. My other question was not related to the 3D housing or the flood recovery or the mobiles. So there is no motion on this?
No motion, no, just questions on the mobiles.
Councillor White, you have a question?
On the 3D housing, there's reports that those houses take like over a year and a half to build them.
Okay, so if there's no other, thank you, Councillor White, through the mayor. If there's no other questions on the mobile homes, I would like to give an update on 3D printed houses as well that may answer some of those questions.
Okay.
If we're good to proceed, I'm seeing yes. Okay, so 3D printed housing, I should note as well here, as the finance lead, I'm fairly dialed into this, but I'm doing this report in the stead of Andrew Nielsen, who spent a large amount of blood, sweat, and tears pushing all of these projects forward, who's unable to be here tonight. So I'm kind of presenting his work, but it's not my own. Well, I have a hand in it. 3D printed housing. So this was put forward as kind of a leading edge or a pioneering construction method. There's some really attractive things about this 3D printed housing. One is that the initial indications is that it can at least be cost competitive, which is what we're looking for. And another big thing that we're looking for at this point is that it has reduced reliance on traditional contractors, carpenters, that sort of thing. In a normal, perfectly functioning market system, you'd have exactly the same number of contractors as you need to build things. But of course, in a flood affected community, as we all know, there's a very, very, very long lineup to get anything done at all. So building new houses is very difficult. And for the city to engage on building new houses here would, of course, take away contractors from people who are trying to renovate their own homes. So that was a very attractive thing about 3D printing. We started off the project kind of as a big picture, envisioning a number of single family homes, and that was based on an existing development that the contractor 20AM did in a Kootenay town that I actually can't remember the name, a small town in the Kootenays. They had a number of single standalone homes that were about 600 square feet. So we kind of took some of the costing data and then put that forward to the province as a, will you fund this for us to try for our residents here? The province responded positively to that, and we actually engaged on a fairly in-depth feasibility study at that point. And of course, having this as not a typical construction method, you don't want to sink millions of dollars into it before you realize that it is more expensive or doesn't work or et cetera. So we're probably 3/4 of the way through that feasibility study. They're looking at a number of things, land parcels of course being one of them, but we kind of gave them the free rein to say, find the best way that 3D printing houses works in a situation like this. even if you have to change some of the variables. And so they did. They actually came back with, instead of single family homes, they came back with 2 8-plexes, which happened to work very, very good on the site that we're looking at, because we have some utility servicing issues in pulling in a whole bunch of individual lots. So we changed the project to 2 different 8-plexes. They're at the design stage where they're kind of designing facade, sending out material quoting costs, figuring out insulation costs, etc. And then going to compare that to a more traditional stick-built structure, or at least prefab structure in labor needs and cost as well. So, because that technical study identified a few different things, one of the main issues that's pushing back the time is not actually the 3D printing at this point, it's the what's called a Q200 flood level, or what we need by our bylaw and other statutes to build new infrastructure to. So you can't give permitting to somebody to build a house right beside a river at the level of the river, even if you wanted to. We can change our bylaw somewhat, but we can't change it to below the Q200 standard. And Q200 just means what you would expect the river to flood to in a 200-year level. That, of course, in flood-affected communities, including our own, changes after big events like this. And so we are looking at a new Q200 standard in Merritt, which puts developments like this, and of course, as you've seen through the material given here, this development on Quilchena, needs to actually come up a fairly significant amount in order to hit that standard. So there needs to be some earthworks on that project that was not anticipated before. So I'm going to say that the best case scenario is that we start getting some of the earthworks done this year, and that we start 3D printing in spring, but we need to be able to build to that flood standard. So that is actually one of the primary holdups at this point. Which again isn't the worst thing in the world probably, because we're able to fulfill a lot of that shorter term needs, transition needs with the mobile home development, and spend the time that requires, or that we require to do this one more properly and do a proper feasibility study, and hopefully end up with a much better project.
One of the questions I think Councillor White had was, does it take that long to build them? A year?
Oh, sorry, I apologize. No, you can print one of these in like couple weeks for the actual printing. So, I mean, in many ways, Councillor White through the mayor, it's very similar to a traditional kind of put the walls up structure, except instead of putting the walls up on your building envelope where you frame it all in, insulate it, vapor barrier, drywall, and then do some kind of outside facade, and then you put the roof over top of that, you're basically just 3D printing and putting some insulation. So there's just a different step of events. It's going to be a little bit quicker than what would be a traditional stick build, but just require different material for that. Of course, more cement, more concrete, that kind of thing. So yeah, to answer your question, I hope that answers your question. I mean, these would get printed out probably about a month for the 8-plex, although we'll know at that feasibility study, but it doesn't take a year.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
One thing I wanted to add on that as well is it doesn't replace a lot of the existing things that you need to do within a home. So this is akin to looking at the framing section of a home, which you guys have seen frames, all of a sudden like a frame is up. It also incorporates sort of the drywall component, but you've got, it's tough to compare exactly in terms of build times, but I think that the important thing to recognize with this is I need you to know we're not drinking the Kool-Aid on this being like the savior of Merritt and that all the homes are going to be printed with 3D printers. We think that it's been very advantageous to us to discuss 3D printing because this has led to an interest in funding Merritt housing projects that we simply did not have before we started having those discussions. So I think that you need to recognize that that's part of this for us is that this is a strategic element that governments would like to explore further. And so they're wanting to use us as something of a test case and a partner to explore the viability of this. Because while it may not be wildly faster right now, and in fact, there might be a case that because of all the feasibility and everything else you have to do, maybe it ends up being slower. But they're very particularly interested in looking at 3D printing, not just housing in general for a smaller component of the dollars that have been provided. The other thing that I would say is we've received substantial private interest in advancing this technology. For example, the City of Merritt, it's now no longer confidential, so I can share that we have received it, but the donor is still confidential. We've received a $500,000 donation for this project, specifically because it's a 3D printing project. They want to see advancement in that particular technology. And so what we found is that though we've heard a lot of different frustrations and grumbling, like, hey, you could do it faster, just go whip up a stick build. I'll get in there tomorrow. We can make this happen. We understand what people are saying with that, but for a smaller component of the funds, part of the reason we received them and part of the funding that we're receiving, it's very contingent on kind of testing out the ability to advance this new technology. So hopefully that helps council with some of the narrative that you're probably also receiving as to why it is that we wouldn't be just automatically looking at other methods of housing for this. So thanks, Sean. Sean doesn't disqualify anything that Sean said. So
yeah, it's not like you set up a printer and it prints the washer and the dryer. This is, I mean, I don't know if anyone has done construction before, but when you look at, you know, some buildings have moved to what's called ICF or insulated concrete forms, which, you know, gets very boring when you say ICF construction, but 3D printed construction, and everyone gets really excited, but it's really the same thing. It's applying a new technology to a building envelope, and we happen to get a provincial grant to be able to trial this new technology, which will hopefully result in some increased housing for Merritt, and will also result in some increased visibility for kind of the issue some of our population is going through. So it's not by any means a wonder substance or a wonder method, but you know, it's something that we'd like to try out. Okay, number
Any other
three. You know what? I'm
questions
sorry.
for
More
Sean
questions.
on
Yeah.
3D printing? Okay, now your final
My
one.
apologies, Your Worship.
That's okay.
So the third program is called the Improved Modern Housing Options for Merritt Evacuees, which is shortened to the I'm Home program. We originally came up with this in a brainstorming session way back in December before we got funding for anything at all. It was not in its current form, but you know, the same kind of idea of subsidizing the development, the permitting, and giving some technical expertise from a contractor, from a construction expert, for somebody who said, yes, okay, I'm rebuilding my home, my flooded home. I would like to add a secondary income suite. How would I go about doing that? Or somebody else in another section of town that wasn't flood affected to say, hey, I noticed that lots of people are renting out laneway homes and moving in a laneway home to their property. Is that a permitted use? How do I go about doing that? And kind of taking a little bit of the risk of purchase of that for them. So the program was proposed in this contribution agreement that went through municipal affairs, and so we had actually thought that the program itself was approved during this contribution agreement where we got this $12 million, and used Don MacArthur and his team did a fantastic job of really getting to the meat of it, getting the program out into different funding streams, and putting it through his whole building inspector team, coming up with any issues, solving any issues. And then of course I went back to Andrew Nielsen, who liaised with BC Housing. One of the notes in our contribution agreement is that we need to work with BC Housing on whatever housing programs we're proposing here. So we did it. We worked through with BC Housing. They went back and forth, and a lot of BC Housing's questions was, how does this directly affect flood evacuees? Where's this money going? How are you going to track it, etc. So we resolved all those things, and Andrew was able to get an official letter of support for the program from BC Housing, which was a pretty big deal for us because we figured that was the final, hey, we're done. We were actually almost ready to hit the go button. Unfortunately, municipal affairs came back at what was very late in the process and said that the program ran afoul of some of the language in the contribution agreement that was drafted. They carried the other two programs in the original contribution agreement, but this program was fairly small in comparison. This is targeted out as $1 million program, and it wasn't carried through in what the Treasury Board agreement was. So where are we now? That program has been somewhat shelved. I personally and the entire ROC team sees very, very good value in that. And in terms of a dollar per bed or dollar per unit, this is by far the best return on investment. The issue that Community Affairs had with it is that it doesn't result in a municipal asset. So this is a subsidization of fees, of charges, of, you know, if somebody has a window that's 12 inches in their basement and they need to cut it out to 15 in order to legalize their suite, there would be money available to do that. That doesn't necessarily result in a municipal asset, so that was what this deal got crushed on for the current time. We're still in negotiations with them to see if we can find a way to make this work. In the interim, there may be some other funding opportunities. There may be some other things in the City of Merritt infrastructure that's flood related that we could fund, and then the City of Merritt would have a little bit of freed up municipal budget to pursue this program on their own. And as soon as the City of Merritt decides to pursue this program on their own, then they wouldn't be bound by the rules of the contribution agreement nor of BC Housing. So there's a few things that we're looking at. This is fairly recently, in the last week or two here, that this program has run into this rough step here. But we've got what is basically a shovel-ready program that is looking for funding at this point. I suspect you'll see more of this, but not at this particular council meeting. Any
And the
questions?
funding we're looking for is approximately $1 million, is that
You know
correct?
what? It's a bit of a scalable program, Your Honor. Or Worship, you could run this with 400,000, just going off my gut feel. You could run this and actually make a difference at 400,000. $1 million, of course, would make significantly more. Below 400,000, you do have some positions, such as like a building inspector, contractor type person who's envisioned to kind of consult with people directly to encourage this, to almost sell the idea of creating basement suites, that you do need to have enough seed money for them to do their work properly. But certainly we could go with a $400,000 or an $800,000 project and still have very good results.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Strang?
Okay.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to CAO report. Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I want to just add one point to what Mr. Strang said here, is that where we thought we had funding for this, if this helps in your political discussions, we'll give $1 million back and they can give us $1 million through another channel that doesn't have these same restrictions, and we're open to that. So we can get creative with this in your discussions, or you can just go find us more money. That would be a fantastic option. But we've been barking up as many trees on this as we could in the last week, and so I'm not going to say the door is closed, as Sean has indicated, but there's not very much light coming through that crack at the moment. So in terms of CAO update, I'm very happy to be able to report since our last meeting. Of course, we've added Marilyn Christensen to our team. Thank you for acknowledging her earlier on in the meeting, Your Worship. We're very excited to have her as part of our economic development team. She is very eager and excited to get going. She was at the community airport today, took in the Elvis Festival. She's been all over the place trying to really get a sense and feel for our community. Has been so quick on the uptake with introducing herself to societies and partner organizations, and just very excited about the level of enthusiasm, and is digging right into our economic development plan. We've connected her with Amber Papow at TNV and others. So for 2 days in, I'm very content with the level of people she's met. I swear she knows half of Merritt already. So we're excited to be able to bring her on. Happy to announce as well that we have a signed agreement with a Director of Planning and Development Services, with a start date of August 23rd. So I'll provide a little bit more information here at an upcoming meeting once we've got the last few pieces buttoned out. And we've got an agreement sans a start date with a potential Director of Public Works and Engineering as well. So very happy to announce that we're starting to turn the tide a little bit here, and bring some new folks onto our team, and so happy to have them here. On the flip side, you saw Don's face today. Don, his last day with the city here is Thursday formally, and so doing some remote work / vacation as he's kind of phasing out here. There's still, it won't be the last you see of Don. He'll be assisting with files moving forward, albeit as a consultant, until we have kind of things in place and stable with the transition. Another sad update is Andrew Uren, our Superintendent of Public Works. His last day of work is this week as well. So we have some ins, some outs, and I know that it's a challenge. It's a challenge for our team, but we're staying optimistic and excited, and we recognize that this really difficult period we've been through has caused people to evaluate priorities, and we acknowledge the stress of it. And so we wish Andrew and Don all the best, and are excited for those we have and will be having soon. So still on the hunt for some of those other outstanding positions. I'm very happy to report what I felt was an incredibly successful meeting with Minister Blair today. Minister Blair, who is the Federal Minister of Emergency Preparedness, was on his way through the community, and we had an opportunity to share with him the same things that council and public saw at our open house. Walked through a presentation outlining the options available to the city, the background engineering work that we've done, both in terms of LiDAR, bathymetry, water modeling, to really come up with a robust solution that we feel will protect the city of Merritt at great value for taxpayers at the local, provincial, and federal levels. I am happy to report that he was thrilled with the level of detail that we were at. He acknowledged that we were significantly further ahead than other communities as far as having some specific design work done as opposed to theoretical work. So we're at the spot where we're really ready to take action, which surprised him. And we're happy.
Pleasantly surprised him.
We're happy with that. Recognizing, I mean, he knew something was coming, but was happy to see how far advanced we were, the level of consultation, both for consideration of principles within the Sendai framework, upstream, downstream, etc. The excellent news coming out of this is he offered a specific commitment and was really enthusiastic about it, that he would be taking both our report and our request for funding directly to Prime Minister Trudeau, to Minister Freeland, who is the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Prime Minister, as well as Minister LeBlanc, who's the Minister of Infrastructure, and that he would be taking our issue up specifically with those three ministers, which for a meeting like this, that's as good a commitment as I think we probably could have hoped to have received. And I promise you we will be following up on that commitment with as much fervor as I can without being the most annoying person on earth. So I'll find the line, but we'll be following up on it. Just once again thrilled with the work that Merritt has done on that, and happy to announce it.
If I can also
Please.
mention that, he also mentioned he's quite concerned about the whole DFA granting system, and he really wants to get in and shake it up and change things. Now, it may not be available and ready for us but he's listening to us about the difficulties that we're having with funding and trying to move the community forward, and he's really seeing it firsthand. So that was quite positive.
Yeah. The last item that's of more critical information for council is in relation to the temporary dog park that we had set up across the river. You may have heard, but it's kind of community whispers at this point, but I'll confirm it, that Interior Health had some serious concerns with the location of that dog park because of the proximity of dog fecal matter to our water system. And so we've had to pivot fairly quickly and work on an alternate solution. And so Sky has put in a lot of legwork at figuring out what an alignment for the dog park at as a portion of Vote Park could look like, and potentially using the other side of the river as an alternate community amenity. And we've had to put this theoretical plan together with haste in order to meet the needs and requirements of Interior Health. So with that, Sky and Kim, who is going to be responsible for engagement, they are going to be undertaking some consultation with neighbors in the immediate area and talking this through. The challenge at this point is we don't really have a lot of options, and that puts us in a tough spot. So where we'll try and smooth over concerns as best as possible, but really it's going to be going in as a portion of Vote Park as we move forward.
I was going to say our only other option would be that little Walnut Avenue.
Which presents its own sets of challenges. So this isn't the end, and as council has made requests on so many occasions that we should have more than one dog park anyways, and that might be what we end up having discussions about, whether it's usually in other portions of the community, so people don't need to go quite so far. So those are the oral updates that I have for you, Your Worship, and we're anticipating having a strategic plan update for you on the August 23rd agenda.
Okay. Seeing no other issues on the agenda, and we're not going to go public with Mr. Rosardo. We're going to speak to him privately. So at this point,